I think for the last 5 to 10 years, we have seen a true stagnation in AAA projects, and thus a need for higher quality when these games release, which often isn't seen. The need for bigger games, more graphics, giant maps, a million quests in single player titles, and then in multiplayer we just have pure greed with battle passes and shady microtransactions, too many currencies to keep track of, and a fear of missing out to get you to buy whatever they are selling. And of course, let's not forget that almost every new AAA game is like 100 gigabytes in storage just to clog up whatever machine you're using. And if you're on console, make sure you're paying for online too. Like, seriously, I want to play Mario Kart World, but I'm not spending that much on a Switch 2 to then have to pay almost £70 for the game, which is like $95, which no spin-off kart racer is worth, to then have to pay for Nintendo Online if I want to access half the game. It's ridiculous. And if you don't think it is, you have too much money. I was having a conversation with my dad, which kind of sparked the idea for this whole video. Now, he is by no means a hardcore gamer like I would be, or almost anyone watching this video would be. He is very casual. Occasionally plays games with his limited spare time, but he's done so for years and doesn't go too far out of the mainstream, but might sometimes. Now, he was telling me that he's fed up with Call of Duty, and all the memory it takes up, and the money you have to spend to play it, and then he was also telling me that he's been trying to install Destiny 2, because he thinks it offers a cool new experience that he hasn't really got into, but because of all the updates, it was very complicated and confusing to install. It had 13 or something different required add-ons that he had to put onto his PS4, just to get it to work, even though the game was already installed and he could boot it up. And then a lot of the single player games now that he wants to try out are too big or too long to get into when he has a limited amount of time. These are all very fair and valid criticisms of the current market, and probably worse to people who don't understand why it's like this, and that's not even mentioning games that are unbelievably buggy on launch. Some stay that way, some games get fixed, but to someone who isn't keeping up with news on games that they bought a year ago or more, they will probably leave the game and just be disappointed with their purchase. Most of these players won't be on PC and won't be able to get any kind of refund or be able to resell the game if they bought it digitally. At least if you're on Steam, you have that option. In just the last few years, you have Concord, which just got shut down in a week. Skull and Bones, which I was excited for years ago, turned into slop. Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League gutted the Arkhamverse through a multiversal live service model in a mediocre game where you couldn't even finish the main story on release. And then you have games that haven't even released yet, like Bungie's new Marathon game, are already looking dire. If all these titles make you feel a little bit sick, then don't worry. In comes indie games. Ah yes, indie games. Why pay full price for high-resolution ray-tracing, realistic-looking diarrhea when you could play Balatro and get addicted to the silly noises and funny cards for hours? Indie nowadays is often outperforming AAA games in sales and active player numbers, with less realistic-looking graphics, but oozing in style that really sets the game's tone, and with so many free tools like Blender and Unity, these developers can make games in their room on a small budget. I was in uni for games design before I dropped out, and my homework was to go make a game. Indie games are easier to make, so there's constantly something being released on Steam. If they get successful or a publisher behind them like Devolver Digital, they can make their way to consoles too. And these indie devs don't have to worry about a big team lacking coherence or direction, or having a company mess with their ideas to appease shareholders. They can just focus on their vision and make something that actually resonates with players at a cheaper price for the studio and a cheaper price for the players too. Each year I find myself buying maybe one AAA big release game the same year it comes out, maybe two. This year I haven't bought any yet. Last year I bought Space Marine 2, and that's mostly because after release people expressed online that it didn't have those usual AAA problems. But this year, in terms of indie games, I've already bought Haste, Peak, Repo, Monster Prom 4, and a really fun small game called Advent Neon. Please check it out. Oh, and I bought all these games combined for less money than I spent on Space Marine 2. And I've put more time into Haste than Space Marine, after having beaten the main campaign of Space Marine and not even finishing Haste. Now, the size of the game does not, show its quality, but I'm just saying that Space Marine is a lot higher of a price with less time, that you can spend on it, realistically. Even looking at current player counts, indie is often outperforming new AAA releases, especially the bigger indie games. Like Binding of Isaac is an indie game that came out in 2011, and it's doing so well. Did you know that Assassin's Creed Shadows came out? I sure as hell didn't. Look at the fucking Steam charts. Doom the Dark Ages was pretty well received and can barely scrape 1,000. Stardew Valley seems untouchable in comparison, and that was made by one guy. You could argue those games weren't supposed to have longevity in the same way and make sense to be falling off in a few months, but then there are games that aim to have longevity and they're dead. Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, Skull and Bones, Concord, that I mentioned earlier, all were supposed to have longevity. They're all dead. Then you have a game like Elden Ring Night Rain, which is doing incredibly well, but has decided to design itself around a genre that is primarily made up of indie games, roguelikes, one of the pioneers of the genre being Binding of Isaac. So when you have AAA games with both old and new design approaches falling off, and big studios like From Software taking inspiration from indie games, I think it shows a real shift in the modern gaming market. And clearly the big studios are starting to catch on. What this means for the future, I don't know. But these small developers deserve the support and recognition that they're getting. And maybe more big studios are going to look to indie games for inspiration, and we'll get better games overall. Maybe more big studios will try to take risks on creative ideas. Who knows? All I know is I'm going to keep playing my favorite indie games in the meantime. This is all to say that indie games are doing better. They're doing better at capturing an audience, better at longevity, better at multiplayer experiences, better at single-player experiences. They have better style. They're more creative with ideas and direction, and all mostly without shady business practices. Now, of course, there are good AAA games, and there are bad indie games, but the trend is that indie games are doing better at almost everything. Especially when most big game studios are stuck trying to be the next GTA 5 or Fortnite. Stuck trying to capture that lightning in a bottle which they just can't replicate. This was put brilliantly in this video by Legendary Drops, which I'll put in the description if you want to hear more. But essentially, these game studios are just trying this method that they saw work once, and it doesn't... they can't do it. The markets understand that they can't do it, and no one's buying these games. No one wants to play these games. I've mentioned it a lot during this video, but Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League really is the perfect example of this. They saw what worked with some other games, the live service model, and it seems like they shoehorned it into a project which wasn't made for it, and it just crumbled. Even projects that are made for it crumble. But this just did so poorly. And what's worse is, while I was in the process of making this video, W Games came along, and then we kind of figured out that they're trying again. They're trying again for another live service game. Specifically with DC, which it failed, and you're trying again. It's crazy to me. Now, likely they probably saw the success of Marvel Rivals, which is an example of a live service game that's doing quite well for now. They probably saw that, and they're trying to capture that again, and it's the same thing, where you see something work somewhere, and then you try and do it, and I just don't have any hope in it. I think it'll just be another slop game, because that's what they did before. And it's made so much worse because they are throwing away so much money. throwing away so much money that they put into these projects, and then they flop, and then they just fire all the employees. They lay off staff because of the terrible decisions that they made, like, to get to that point. It's so baffling that they would continue. Anyway, I have some more positive things to say now. Indie games are incredible, and they are more influential than you might think. The internet, as we know it, I do not think would be the same without indie games. I mean, they took over YouTube with indie horror many, many times over. You know, a lot of early YouTubers started with Slender, Amnesia, and then that built on to fucking Five Nights at Freddy's.
Hello everybody, my name is Markiplier and welcome to Five Nights at Freddy's, an indie horror game that you guys suggested en masse, and what the fuck? Oh my god!
Which took the world by storm and is, you know, it has a movie now, and it is having a second movie. You cannot understate how influential indie games have been in the age of the internet. Undertale is massive, and Deltarune's doing amazing now. Hollow Knight is incredible, and the bigger studios knew it. They were teasing Silksong for so long, and there was an Xbox, I think there was a specific Xbox showcase where they were showing some piece of hardware, but they were showing Silksong on it because they knew people would talk about it. And now that Silksong is out, people absolutely love it. It's incredible. And then, you know, going back to indie horror, you had Phasmophobia, which had an amazing craze. You have, like, the SCP and Backrooms games, when, you know, those were big. They were indie projects spearheaded by fans, and then you get onto stuff like Lethal Company. Lethal Company was incredible, and is exactly, you know, it's a small, focused experience that you can play with friends, and it's exactly what people, you know, want. And since Lethal Company, there's obviously been a load of games like it, which has kind of come into its own genre, which people have called friend slop. Now, I don't like the term friend slop. I think it's really degrading for what these games actually are, which is fun. They are fun with friends, and I don't think it should be called slop at all. And, you know, Lethal Company was a passion project, and I know a lot of other games are kind of copycats with their own spin on it, but they're still fun. And then you have a game like Peak, which is completely different to Lethal Company, but has those elements, you know, where you're playing with a bunch of friends, and you have those clippable moments that, you know, streamers will do, spread it far and wide, and then people will play and enjoy. And I might have said this earlier in the video, but Peak did incredibly well. It sold well, had a higher player count. It's a really fun game, and that's what all the games need to be, is fun. They just need to be fun. And then they do well. I love it. And Haste, which I've been playing as footage for most of this game.
Video.
I think that's incredible as well. Just running around is so fun. I could glaze so many indie games here. But instead I'll just list some that, you know, came to the top of my head. I love Sifu, one of my favorite indie games. It's like playing a martial arts movie. Deep Rock Galactic, you play dwarves in space mining asteroids. It's amazing. Darkest Dungeon, really cool and stressful, but it's fucking awesome. Intruder, it's a multiplayer stealth game that feels like a fresh twist on custom game fun. It's great. Stray, you play as a cat. What more could you want? Don't Starve Together, another one of my favorite favorite games. It's a survival game. It does not pull its punches. Inscription. It had a little ARG. It's a thrilling little card game. It's got a cool mystery. I like it. Ultra Kill. Fast-paced shooter. Incredibly fun, tight gameplay. Fantastic level design. What more could you want? Overcooked. A chaotic multiplayer game. You cook meals with your friends under a lot of pressure. Schedule 1. Essentially a Breaking Bad simulator where you start out as small drug dealers and make your own drug empire. Those are a few off the top of my head. There are so many more indie games that I could list, obviously, that I haven't mentioned in this video, but I just really wanted to quickly, get a few out there. I love indie games. They deserve all the love that they're getting, especially now, and all the recognition that they're getting for what people actually want, and it's great. Play more indie games. If you don't, I'm sure you'll find some gems that I haven't even mentioned. There are so many. Oh my god! Recently, I've been playing Pseudo Regalia. It's like a N64 style Metroidvania, similar to like Hollow Knight, but it's in 3D, and it's so fun. It's so fun. The movement mechanics are great, and it's got a hot furry goat as a character. Ignore that part. I like the movement. But indie games are great, and this last bit was off the cuff, so it was a bit rambly, but oh my god, indie reference. But it's there's always going to be slop and things that aren't so great, whether it's indie or AAA, but you cannot understate that indie is just making way more bangers than AAA is right now. And even if it's a game that you don't like, the influence of it is understood and felt and real. And yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. So thanks for watching, I guess. Bye bye.